So much of the inspiration for Jules Whiting's poetry comes from the village of Chelsea in Oxfordshire, where she grew up, and its surrounding countryside. She obtained an MA in creative writing from Bath Spa University, and she had her poems shortlisted for the Gloucester Prize in 2020 and in Buzzwords in the same year. She was commended in the Poetry Society Members Competition in 2020, and she received a special mention in the Spelt Poetry Competition in 2021. Her poems have also appeared in Acumen, Orbis, South, Envoy, The Interpreter's House, The High Window, Highburn Journal, and various anthologies, including the Stanley Spencer Poems anthology published by Two Rivers Press, The Best of British, A Hatchery of Shadows, and Angled by the Flood, all published by SciPo in 2020, and Addicted to Life, which was the Teignmouth Festival anthology in 2021. And we published a poem by Jules in 2019 and 2020 in our competition anthologies. Jules's collaborative pamphlet, What Colour is My Brain, was published in January this year by Hedgehog Press. Folding Time is Jules Whiting's first full collection, and what impressed us when she sent it to us was the imaginative, unsentimental way that she communicates themes of loss, pain, brushes with death and chronic illness, and yet, as Jenny Lewis has said, what shines through Folding Time is sunlight, hope, gratitude for the rapture of living, and the astonishing beauty of the natural world, brought alive with the pin-sharp clarity of a latter-day John Clare. We're so sorry that Jenny couldn't be with us to read tonight, and we send her all our good wishes, and she, of course, will see the recording. So, without more from me, let's go over to Jules. And Jules, would you like to read for us, please?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. I hope you're all sitting really comfortably. You've got your glass of wine and maybe some nibbles. And if so, I'll begin. This first section is about the transplant and about being in hospital. The first poem, which is probably a really bad poem to choose as the first poem, because I have a real problem in actually saying the title. But I've been practicing all day, and it's cadaveric, which is the same as cadaver, but it's cadaveric transplant. Yes, I think of him. Now he's part of me. These first few days, fearful my body might reject him. If I move too quickly, I imagine him as a baby, cradle him in lamb's wool fleece, collect sounds to hush him, try not to remind him how they operated with glove-handled questions, sliced a sheath of skin, unfurled a pork-marked strip, crawled the cavity of his ribs under wet with secretions, then left. Other times I feel we are both well. He's holding hands with me and we are dancing on white sand, joyful, balancing ourselves, the sea at our feet, the sun suspended, ready to fall. If, when I'm ready, I'll write to his family. All of I know of him is, he was 51. It will be 2 years before I name him Michael. So now you know, when I talk to Michael, it's my liver I'm talking to. And hopefully he appreciates it. Okay, this next poem is called Folding Time. And it was a difficult time, I think, for the family, really, in the fact that they went through it far more than I did, because I can't really remember much of the period of time when I was in hospital waiting for a transplant. At first, they said that there's nothing that they could do and were told to say goodbye to me before they put me on life support. But this is vaguely folding time. I dream of you, not in a romantic way, but standing by the door, muttering. I dream a larger dream in colour of you running, just starting to panic. I know when I wake, you won't be here. You're covering our bed with my belongings, watching as they bond into clusters, packing them away like dead things. Even as I think this, I'm aware of your hands supporting mine, your thumb bumping the small indent where my wedding bands used to be. Show me how to fold back time, back to Galicia, that seafront cafe, filled with sea mess and cooking, our fingers dripping silver-scaled sardines, glistening with oil and wetness into our mouths, picking the small bones from our lips. And how later, if I fold time forward, landed another chance, my rings will swim back across your palm with a dull gleam of fish. As I say, during that period of time, I was very out of it and can hardly remember very much. But this sort of came out of that period of time in retrospect, really. It's called the uncertainty principle. And it's basically that the uncertainty principle is that you can't actually ever measure which direction a particle is traveling or its exact position. The day before life support, you're embraced like dust. We say goodbye. These days, I'm more there than here. And even when I'm with you, I speak of there, how the carriage is empty. The sun's glancing off dirty windows. There's dust in the air, atoms of past occupants, flickering points on a stopped train. I tell you that up to 70% of household dust consists of dead skin, an entire layer sloughed in 3 days. Our fragile shells dispersed and held aloft by sunbeams. Strangers to one another, we dance at the slightest disturbance, a reminder that we are made of the same elements as the stars themselves. Maybe that's why there are limits to knowing the exact position of movement of any particle. Nothing has meaning till it changes who we are. When I stare into the light, I see a layer of dust. I question how deep does time need to be before all the dust is thick enough for footsteps to leave their mark. And when the light goes, what then? Will I go with it? Between here and there, I need to find someone, anyone, who is travelling in the same direction. Find out about this unscheduled halt. Ask the question, why am I here? But the carriage is empty. The sun's glancing off dirty windows. There's dust in the air, atoms of past occupants, flickering points on a stopped train. Does dust remember the weight of all our actions, this side of the light? And this next poem I wrote for my daughter. For the first 3 or 4 days, I think I hallucinated when I was in ICU. They took me off of life support after the things, and I was absolutely convinced, 100% convinced. First of all, that everybody was aliens, which was really weird. And then after I got over that, I'm sure I heard 2 members of staff whispering at night about how they wanted to kill all the Jewish baby boys. And so So I thought, well, they're not going to get to them from me. So I took off my finger thing, you know, that beeping thing. And then I tried to pull out the line in my neck, but I didn't have enough nerve to do it. But the nurse obviously saw me, and actually she did me a great favor, because she came over and she said, I will not have the mess all over the floor at this time of night. Really, and I thought, oh, they can't be aliens. They can't be wanting to do that. But I did have this thing. And when I saw my daughter in ICU, all I wanted her to do was to go home and look after her baby boys. So this is it. Turning the tide. She holds out childhood hands that teem with shells and stones, and sells the dream of where we've been, what they've seen. Sent eyes, pure light drained to horizontal lines. That white tide onto shell-strewn pale. Us eating pasties, taken by surprise by that seagull's swoop. I couldn't prevent that loss, nor my fears of our daughter. She needs to leave me, go home, protect her infant boys. Mum, they're fine, I've checked, it's you. You can fight this, you're strong, just hang on. She lifts my hand, settles a seashell safe inside. She knows at some unstated time, it will turn the tide. And the last, oh no, I'm going to read that now. Sorry. I've got my list in front of me, see, I'm just trying. Right. Throughout the book, there's transplant catechisms, and it's done in two voices, obviously the voice of the staff and then my response to it. You probably won't get it quite so good at not being able to see it, but I will try and do the two voices, probably not very well, but there you go. Transplant Catechism 3. Oh, I need to say that this is when they come to turn my body. When you have a liver transplant, it's not like a neat little scar that they do. They cut you from just under your breastbone down to your belly button, and then a inverted V on either side. So it's called a Mercedes scar, because it looks like a Mercedes badge. So I always think I really ought to get a Mercedes car or something if I had the money, but there you go. Okay, when they come to turn my body. Which way do you want to face? What it is to be brought back. Which way do you want to face? What it is to enter this world again. Which way do you want to face? What it is to be an object. Which way do you want to face? What it is to be a fusion of male and female. Which way do you want to face? What it is to have a stranger's genetic memory mixed with mine. What's it to be? What am I to be? And then the last poem of this section is a year later. I'm going for sort of like the standard checkups that you have to go for if you've been keeping well at King's College Hospital. And it's called Is Love the Sweetest Thing? A year ago, we all held our breath as death chased me down long corridors, the sun at my back, trying to disconnect my shadow from yours. Heading for my appointment at King's as a porter steers an oxygen cylinder past. It's then that you decide to mention our ghosts, how they're sitting huddled together outside Trundle Ward. He's perched on the thin edge of a blue plastic chair. She's in a wheelchair. Their hands are linked, stuck forever with tear-bubbled eyes. Goodbye for them was just a second ago. I don't remember that time. The yellowing, the life support, the doctor's words, there's nothing more we can do. We leave after a routine of bloods, liver function, tacrolimus levels, back to Denmark Hill where we parked. I catch out of the corner of my eye, in the lift, the pharmacy, on the drive home, our ghosts in the rear view mirror. And that's the last one for this section. Thank you.
Oh, that is very beautiful and very moving. Goodness, what an experience. Thank you very much for that first reading, Jules. Now we're going to go on and we're going to hear from Gail Ferguson, who moved to Oxfordshire after living abroad for some years. She studied poetry at degree level and has belonged to various writing groups. Her poems have been published in a number of anthologies and regularly in South magazine. Recently, she was shortlisted for the Plough Poetry Competition, and she has also been involved in selecting poetry for publication. Gail works as a freelance editor and cares passionately about the natural world and its future. So, Gail, we're looking forward to hearing poems from you. Would you like to unmute, please?
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. You can hear me, yes? Good. Okay. I'm delighted. I'm honoured, really, to be asked to read this evening on the occasion of Jules's launch. I've had the privilege of writing with Jules for a few years. She's a very dedicated and talented poet, as you know, and very generous with her time, I have to say. Her collection, as you know and have seen and heard, is honest and moving, and everybody should buy it. Okay, so I've got 5 poems to read, 3 of them short. So I'm starting with this one, Mudlarks. Mudlarks. The tide is out. Puddled pockets of water sun dazzle the river mud. The geese bunch forward, taking turns to bend and probe the bank for food. The lead bird stretches his neck up, checks around, then arcs it down again. A thin girl also stoops and pecks at the mud, searching beady-eyed, picking up, discarding pottery shards and cracked ceramic pipes, prizing pork pie inkwells, twisted brass pins, leather shoe straps, must be kept damp, and a corroded halfpenny from 1754. As the unfussy birds rake the seagrass, she holds on to the past, imagines a future. They move slowly down the foreshore, girl and geese, bending and straightening. Later, when the river returns to fill the banks, they swim together in the cold current. At sunset, she slides out of the water, hauls her hoard homewards as the geese lift into the sky. Okay, the next 3 poems are Fatresses, which, as I understand it, originally was a medieval French form, which really consists of a couplet, which makes sense in itself, and which then is used for the first and last line of an 11-line poem. So the first one is my own couplet. So this is called Wild News. Have you ever tried to ride a stallion? Moonlight takes the reins from you. Have you ever tried to ride a stallion? His black eyes fired by stars. In buck and plunge, he tramples the earth where truth should grow. You scatter the words by night to seed and flower somewhere between the stones. Guerrilla gardening, a stealthy attempt to capture the shape of something not quite known, unseen but felt. Moonlight takes the reins from you. Okay, this next one, I stole the couplet from T.S. Eliot's, I think it's Little Gidding, but from the 4 quartets anyway. I called it Prospect. And the children in the apple tree, not known because not looked for. And the children in the apple tree, unseen, climb higher, like the dragonfly as it leaves the pond to unfurl cellophane wings. Magnetic forces guide fledged swifts across the hemisphere. Volcanoes heave fire into oceans where the male seahorse gives birth to clouds of perfect likenesses, as the moon conducts the waves. And somewhere in the deep of sea or forest, a tiny bloom, the savior of the world, thrives and fades, not known because not looked for. Okay, and my last factress, again, I'm afraid I stole the couplet from a poem by Anne Haverty. My poem is called 1917. Two young men in a tilled field, and a horse's ghost goes with them. Two young men in a tilled field hold each other like sacks of potatoes, stumble under a steel grey sky riven with flashes, shaken by thunder and the battle screams of diving hawks, heading beak first into mud and silhouetted orchards. Two young men keep their bloodshot eyes on the distant fence with its flapping crow and false promise, drag leaden legs across once seeded soil, where no one cares to bring in its harvest of corpses, and a horse's ghost goes with them. So last of all, slightly different, a poem written for my then 13-year-old grandson, or I say for him. He features in it. Space Voyager. Right now, he is flying the rocket to Mars. Commander K takes his role seriously, staccato tapping the control keys while seeing how many floating Watsits he can catch in his teeth. I am in his hands. His mother and sister are in his hands. We are all in his hands. He looks us over. NASA is on the intercom. He does not answer. Everything he needs is in his head. We are in his hands, but not in his head. When we land on Mars, which amazingly we do, he will be first out, down the ladder onto the thick red dust. He won't like it, the smell, the heat, how it feels, but he will show us all the way. Back on Earth, communication is more difficult, but the trip, while long, will have been worthwhile.
Thank you, Gail. That was a great reading, and an even bigger thank you for being such a dear friend and a writing buddy. My book would never have got written, I don't think, without her listening to endless manuscripts and editing the final drafts. So thank you, big thank you. This next section that I'm going to read about is really about relationships, actually. Relationships change, I think, when one of the people are not ill, or something happens, or there's such a change. And I'm going to read, the first poem is called Damaged, in fact. You've been a while now with the roses, cutting away excess buds, spoilt flowers. It's a job I can't face, this shortening of life. From the competition of leaves, you pluck a feather. It won't lie flat, its backbone slips to one side. Along the length, a tie-dye of colour graduates from caramel to charcoal brown. And despite your thumb draggling filaments, soothing the barbs, a gap remains. You map its imperfection, my belly tightens. Feel again your light touch on raw scar, judging. In the wash of light beyond the back door, butterflies balloon through purple budding. Shadows circle, waiting for evening to land. This next poem, I'm going to read it in this order, is called Foreign Language. In the rain-filled distance, trains rattle through. Closer, the thrush's chortle repeats, like a forgotten language, trying to get free. You sit with me at the beginning of the day, and I am wondering if you ever think of those plans we made for our future. And I am wondering if you ever think of those plans you make for your future. This next one is called Display Cabinet. One of the jobs that I had before I got ill was to money manage vulnerable adults as part of social services thing. And so I had to clear out a lot of houses. And I was absolutely determined that, you know, as kids and Dave wouldn't have to clear out all of my stuff. So, you know, years on, I still haven't cleared it. But one of the things that I did actually clear was the display cabinet. The display cabinet. Although overdressed in walnut veneer, I admire its half-circle stance, the 7 glass panes, the swell of their curves, its watermark backing of soft brown and salmon scrolls, even those dud-heavy wooden shelves Grampy Jim made when the glass got broken. I loved it from first sight, stood in the corner of Gran's home, crammed with wedding gifts, the silver plate, an ugly vase, and those 2 green long-necked pugs that Uncle Arthur bought with his first wage. And when Gran died, it travelled with me from house to house, always there. It became a pottery sty when the kids were small, housing a whole family of napped West pigs. During the kids' experimental teenage years, it kept the booze locked away with its treble brass key. Now it holds meteorites, fossils, stones, my growing out of motherhood collection. When I'm gone, where will it go? I've asked the kids. They don't want it. And this next one really follows on alongside it, really. It's called Collecting Markers. And as I say, I do collect stones and shells and rocks and anything the kids want to come and bring me when they come and visit. And there was one instance which I'm going to tell you about, well, several instances I'm going to tell you about, called Collecting Markers. Your voice. Look outside, look outside. And there it is, my latest stone. You lift it from the car, great concrete rolling it around the side of the house. I'm sure it wasn't that big on the beach, but wind scale, Sellafield, sea scale, whatever it is called these days. I wonder if it's radioactive. My life has been a navigation of geology, a journey through igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic, detailed by elemental truths, forged under pressure, and measured for guilt on the rocking stone. In Scotland, I picked ribbed granite. The Isle of Wight saw me gather 3 graduating grey pebbles looped with cream. And last Christmas in Kidlington, you bought me a meteorite at a dead man's auction, a marker for that moment in our car, you with the filled glasses, me with tea and sandwiches, jam clinging to the turn of my lip, that you laughingly pressed away with a sweep of your tongue. Our view through the swipe window screen, I'll say that again. Our view through the swipe window screen, a picture clear to the horizon, a patch of glass and moss, a mud flat pin-cushioned with headless reeds, the distant house, windows set afire by the emigrating sun, as a ball of dust and ice, a frisson of light streaked across the heavens. Your binoculars scrape the air raw, sure some shooting star could show us the way. I heft the meteor's contour in my palm, measure its fusion, its radical lines of melting. Imagining when I'm done, a cairn in the garden where we will wait patiently for the stones to bloom. And then the last poem, which I thought I'd marked off, but I can't find now. It will be a minute, a second. Sorry about this. I thought I was so organized. All right. It's called Tucked Between the Pages of a Wordless Glance. This is probably one of the times that I rejected over the 10 years, and probably towards one of the last rejections. Tucked between the pages of a wordless glance. At my hospital bed, you brace me as the doctor draws out fluid for the test, then follow his white coat into the corridor. Once back, you say, we have to be rational. One of these days, they won't be able to fix you. On this visit, there are no grapes, just a white rosebud, a tulip shaped starting to curl, its petals loosening the faintest smell. You lay it on the sheets, I've smoothed white, and say, you can put the rose in a vase, enjoy its beauty before it dies, or keep it forever tucked between the pages of blotting paper. Thank you.
Goodness me, you've left me tearful. That's a beautiful poem, that last one. Thank you. So, we're going to hear now from our second guest reader, Kathleen McPhillamy, who grew up in Belfast, but has spent most of her adult life in England and now lives in Oxford. She has published 4 collections of poetry, the most recent being Back Country by Literal Press this year. She organises the Oxford Stanza 2 monthly open mic on Zoom. She also hosts a poetry podcast magazine, Poetry Worth Hearing, and she would welcome submissions. I've gone to that. It looks very good. So if anybody wants to read some poems on a podcast for Kathleen, do go to it. And now we're going to hear from Kathleen herself.
Oh, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're fine.
Good. Okay. I'm delighted to be taking part this evening, even if I am kind of the understudy. I'd just like to say that Poetry Worth Hearing episode 9 happened to be out today, and it features Jules reading some of the poems from the book. So I hope people will give it a listen. It's on all the usual platforms, Apple, Google, Audible. Right, so I'm going to read 4 poems from my book, 4 poems about birds, but they're not really just about birds. The first one is thinking about what it means to be wild and what it means perhaps to be free, and the 2 things aren't necessarily the same. So this is Red Kite. The kite is a civilized bird. It has followed us up the M40. Feasting on bins and roadkill, it has thrived and multiplied. One circles above the tall trees at the far end of the allotments. As sunlight catches its underwing, there is a flashing awareness of red. Sometimes it perches on a high branch, resting, or waiting and watching the bustling rabbit metropolis in the adjoining nature reserve, reclaimed from a city landfill, raised above the river by rubbish. The saplings have grown into trees. There are owls and snipe and cuckoos, and above them again, the kite climbs and wheels and drifts in a casual mastery of air that is something quite different from freedom. And the next two poems are really about migration, displacement, and prejudice. The first one is called Noisy Squawkers, and it's about the green parakeets, which we see everywhere now. I saw the parakeets yesterday where I knew they would be, in the park near the riverbank, flashing from tree to tree. How out of place they are with their bright green feathers, their long foreign tails, and their raucous blether. I have searched all spring for the blue of the kingfisher, and I yearn for the ratcheting cry of the corncrake I heard as a child, lying on top of the single haystack in the scrubby field behind our house. But now it's parakeets, confronting with valor and noisy cheerfulness the cold, wet of our winters. Let them stay, like the rabbit and grey squirrel, configure our landscape, become unremarkable. And the next one has a little story. When I was a child, we had budgies, and the budgies all died or escaped or disappeared, but we still had a budgie cage. And then one day, a white budgie landed in the garden, and more in hope than expectation, we took out the budgie cage, opened the door, and the budgie hopped in. And that budgie stayed with us for several years. Then 2 years ago, on our allotments WhatsApp group, someone put up a picture of a budgie which had landed on the allotments. So this poem is called Context. This budgie on the allotment doesn't belong. The dejection of his shoulders, drooping wings, show that he knows he's the wrong color. His beak is the wrong shape. He is altogether out of place. If only someone would come with a cage, put it beside him on the ground with a bell and a mirror and a millet spray, he would hop in, everyone would relax, and he would be okay. And finally, this is a poem which sort of looks to the past and to the future. It's called Archaeopteryx, and Archaeopteryx was the creature from which modern birds are supposed to have evolved. And one other thing is that apparently they believe nowadays that feathers didn't develop for flying, but to for keeping warm. So diving into layers of old gold, muzzle and forepaws, dog digs deeper where autumn drifts against tree roots, disturbs the fragile bone cages, skeletal remnants of dead things, rat, squirrel, or a fallen bird. Leaves decay like a child's painting. All those colors to dirty brown meld with the flesh of small cadavers, rotting down to a forest mulch. Was it like this, or was it more conscient digging uncovered the exquisitely etched feather or the old wing of the vogel, encrypted data of time before time, when tiny dinosaurs flapped their overcoats, took to the air in powered flight? Wintry clouds lower on the tree line. Darkness draws down on these late days. Can we imagine ourselves as fossils, incised in rocks still unformed, excavated by chance or purposeful quest? Can we imagine the light in their eyes as they gaze at our relics freighted with meaning? Thank you very much.
Now, the next section, I'm going to try and convince you. We've been pretty miserable up until this point, but I want to convince you. Hopefully this next section will show you how I'm viewing death. Death is beautiful in lots of ways, apart from it just being part of life. But when I was going through the experience of the liver transplant, I actually had a near-death experience, because everybody does, I suppose. But it was the most beautiful thing that has ever happened to me. I was in a street, kind of like St. Giles, for those that know it. So stone buildings that were all sun-warmed on either side, lime trees going down in front of them. And it's a really wide avenue. And then in the centre, there were loads and loads, hundreds of metal benches, and they were filled with people. And I was walking towards the benches, and those people were the happiest and most content that I have ever seen a person, and all of them felt the same, and I felt the same. And the sun wasn't up, but it was bright sunshine, but we were all waiting for the sun to come somehow, or the light to come. And then I got woken up. But I do really seriously believe that there is something there. I'm not religious, but it was a fantastic experience, and I just hope it happens again when time comes. But I do want to say that it is an amazing thing, and also how you view life is different. I'm going to read this first poem. It's called "And Other Beautiful Things," and it's about the near-death experience, really. My near-death experience you put down to encephalitis. So when through the window, in what starts as little more than a deepening of the blue, shades of glory, red and gold, are painted with the glide of blade or stipple brush, as the sun recasts its brilliance. You don't seem to see what is being called into being, how the soft wash of promise dissembles the breeze to a vanishing point, how all things are about the glow of light, not that piercing silver blue that wipes all detail, more Turner's seaport at sunset. I've encountered this light before, the softness of white that blurs with cream and wears such stillness. In these last bright days of the year, when birds flush each other along, if not the sunset, believe in what those no-frilled trees shelter deep inside. Fetus leaves, the formation of spring. This next poem, oh, actually, this is quite miserable, this poem, but there you go. You can't have them all. This is at the start of COVID. One of the major concerns by the government and the health service was the fact that they wouldn't have enough equipment to deal with the needs, and certainly not enough ventilators. So they asked the doctors to phone round those who were extremely vulnerable to ask them whether they would like to actually have anything done if they did get COVID, or whether they were just happy to let it run its course. And I am okay with death, but somehow it just caught me on the hop, coming on the telephone, if you know what I mean, something. So that's this poem, The Between. The window, a night mirror, allows reflection. I'm between the room and its doppelganger. Papers and books levitate above a scaffold plank table, and to the side, a skeletal frame of her furlong clothes horse. Outside, everything has the soft edge of near dawn. Velvet trees, Prussian blue air, chalk-drawn clouds. Just the stout end of our neighbour's house stops the view dead. Its chimney, a one-finger gesture. 5 minutes more, and the birds will be too loud, dark too light. The past will have set, and I won't be between. Behind me is the silence of a house processing yesterday. The doctor's phone call, his raspy magpie chatter, asking about a DNR order. And I'm a child unable to run fast enough, not understanding why my feet are slow motioning. The chaser is getting closer, taking time walking steps. I can't say the words, but you can imagine them, like ground alder, being pulled up from the dirt, congested with bitter smelling white root. Okay, so the next poem that I'm going to read is called Farm Hill and Closing the Circle. Yes, I am. Years ago, on this upward bend in the darkness, on our way home, we'd see the same owl, its eyes in the swerve of the headlight, and across the lane, a fox patterning a rutty field. There's a 30-year gap in which I imagine they've taught their offspring their routines as we've taught ours, and how later generations may repeat our rituals. Every Christmas, we've walked our children, driven our children's children to the top of villages, where homes shine with icicles, snowmen, deer, lights that unwind the night. More years have passed. Christmas again, perhaps my last. We're travelling the upward bend. Our dipped headlights strode a rabbit sitting squat still. In the distance, and coming out of the darkness, a train unreels its cine film of lit windows, perforating the air between soil and sky. And we are passing the church, Grampy's grave, beeping the hall, calling out to him, "Hello, Jimmer," as we take the humpback bridge over the bunky line, stomach leaping fast, laughing, knowing we are nearly home. And just two short poems, which is Cholsey Cemetery. Some say we die twice, once when we pass away, once when we're lost to memory. Perhaps that's why the corner of Cholsey Cemetery is bare of headstones. No one wants the lunatics remembered. Others claim this place of death is only for the living. It's a space to rewrite the dead. For me, it's where you'll walk the future, between the church walls and their grassy beds, with the smell of crushed sorrel, cat's ear clover, as you shelter beneath your green and red umbrella from the pip, pip, pip of slow, heavy rain on the chestnut leaves. And my last poem is How to Be Gone. This is my absolute favourite poem of this book, and I think it sort of incorporates how I feel about everything. How to Be Gone. From the corner of the sky, geese arrow their way somewhere. Do they doubt their readiness to leave? I walk to Lollingden under the railway bridge, where the chime of shingle and the train's rhythm lead out over the loose square fields. It is only here, in this openness, you can tell the sun is eager to extend its time by the way it's hanging on to every last blade of grass, ear of wheat, stretching and stretching the shadows thinner and thinner, I love that as I watch the suns fall below the horizon, it actually took place minutes ago. And what I'm seeing is a time-lagged image. And even more, I love knowing that when the sun and I are gone, the flames will still be licking the sky with colour. Thank you.
Thank you, Jules. Well, that was a wonderful reading. Thank you. What you're going to say something?
Actually, because the one person, well, there's I'll give you, first of all, Janice, thank you ever so much for being my publisher and
Thank you.
so supportive and doing the book. I really, really appreciate that. And I just want to say this really quickly, and to all those people in my poetry life that have provided inspiration, direction, and good old-fashioned know-how. It's Claire Dyer, Tim Liarde, Jenny Lewis, Bill and Oxford Stanza, Dorothy, Next Steps, Jill and Thin Rap Crew, Bridget and Free Range Poets. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it. All the help you've given me.